Hi, this is Jennifer Pionk with A Crocheted Simplicity, and in this video tutorial I'm going to teach you how you can add a stretchy knit look ribbing to your favorite projects. The stitch pattern for this ribbing is already on my blog, so you can actually practice and make a dishcloth if you'd like. But this is the stitch pattern I use when I want to add a stretchy cuff or a band to several different things. You can see here I have a hat band. I've added it to the cuff of a sweater and the cuff of a mitten. I use this stitch pattern a lot for a variety of different things. I love it because it is stretchy, it returns to its natural shape, and when worn it will hug the body part that it's near. So whether it be a cuff for a sleeve or the band on a hat, it's a great technique to know. I'm going to start off with a small swatch for video purposes. For purposes of this video, I made a small swatch. I just made a tube, but you can work from a hat that you're working on or the sleeve of a sweater. It's up to you. Or you can create a small tube. You'll need your yarn and a hook, whatever the pattern calls for. Now, when working this ribbing, because there are several slip stitches included in it, I always keep my working yarn pulled from my ball or my skein. I don't pull directly from the ball or the skein as I'm working because it can add tension to my stitches. It can cause my stitches to be too tight, and then I won't have as much stretch and the gauge will be off. So go ahead and pull a bunch of yarn, lay it in a pile next to you, grab a swatch to work from, and a crochet hook. Now the hook size is going to depend on the yarn you're using, the pattern, the size of your cuff. Generally I like to go down a hook size for my band, just because I want to make sure that it fits nicely, whatever I'm trying to get it to fit. So for instance, if I were using a 5mm hook, I'd be using a 4mm hook for the band on a hat if this were a hat. Since it has a lot of stretch to it, you can easily go down a hook size and be okay. It's still going to fit. Okay. Now, the edge that you're working into needs to be in multiples of 2. Okay, it's a stitch pattern repeat in multiples of 2. So if you get to the bottom of your hat and you have an odd number, go ahead and work a decrease, just 1 stitch decrease, or add an increase to get to a multiple of 2. I'm going to use a contrasting color yarn just so that you can see better where I'm working my stitches into. But I'm going to join with a slip stitch in any stitch around the edge, or if you're already working from top down on a hat, you can just continue on. You don't need to join your yarn, it's already joined. Now I'm going to chain 6 just for the video, but chain as many as you need for the width of your cuff or your band, whatever you're working on. And now we're going to work into the back hump of the foundation chain. We're going to work into the ridges. So I'm going to single crochet into the second chain from my hook in the back hump. Single crochet into each stitch across, each chain across to the last chain. Don't single crochet into that last chain just yet. Now we're going to work a single crochet decrease, or single crochet 2 together into this last chain, and the same chain or the same stitch as where your chain began. So you're going to insert your hook into the last chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert your hook into the same stitch as your chain 6. Yarn over, pull up a loop. So you have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all loops on your hook. Now what that single crochet 2 together does is it attaches your band or your cuff to your piece. Okay, now we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch along the edge of our project. Don't work your slip stitch too tight. What this slip stitch does is it acts as our chain 1 at the beginning of a row. So instead of chaining 1, since we're here at the hat, at the edge of the hat, we're going to just slip stitch to the next stitch. That's our chain 1. Now, some people might lose this stitch, this slip stitch here, or they'll want to work into it once we turn. So if you need to, place a scrap piece of yarn or a stitch marker into that stitch. You do not work into this stitch right here. You work into that single crochet 2 together. That's where you begin. So we're going to turn. Now you look, it looks like this is our first stitch, but that's our slip stitch. We're not going to work into that one. Now we're going to work into the back loops only of each stitch across. We're going to slip stitch into the back loop only of each stitch across. So skip this first, the slip stitch, and then work a slip stitch into the back loop only of each stitch. If you began with the chain 6, you should have 5 slip stitches. And we're going to chain 1 and turn. Now when working your slip stitches, make sure that the V's from the loops are the same size as the stitches you worked in the previous row. Okay, if they're not the same size, if they're they can be a little bigger, but if they're a little smaller, you might want to tear them out and work them again. Make sure they're at least the same size as the top loops from the stitches of the previous row. Okay, so we've chained 1 and turned. Now we're going to work into the back loops of our slip stitches, and we're going to work a single crochet into the first 4 stitches, and then a single crochet 2 together in the last stitch and the next stitch along our edge to connect our band. So working into the back loop only, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops to complete the single crochet into the next 3 stitches, the back loop only, and then work a single crochet 2 together, that last slip stitch, and the next stitch along the edge. Now the first one where we chained, we worked into that same stitch. That was just because we were just starting out. Now from every other row on, all the odd numbered rows, we're going to work into the next stitch. So finish that single crochet 2 together in the next stitch along the edge of your hat or whatever you're working. Okay, now we're on an even number row. We need to slip stitch into the next stitch along the edge. Turn. Remember, excuse me, remember to skip over that slip stitch. Work into the back loops only and slip stitch in each stitch across. Chain 1 and turn. And again, repeat that odd number row. Work in the back loops only. Single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. 2, 3, 4, and then single crochet 2 together into that last stitch, the back loop only of the last stitch, and the next stitch along the edge of our project. And then again, we slip stitch into the next stitch, turn, skip over that slip stitch, and then slip stitch in the back loop only of each stitch across. Chain 1 and turn. Now you can see the ribbing is starting to pop out a little bit. We'll work 2 more rows, then I'll let you try it on your own. So work in the back loops only, single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches, or single crochet into each stitch across except for the last one. And then we're going to work a single crochet 2 together in the last stitch and the next stitch along the edge of our project. And then slip stitch into the next stitch, turn, skip over that slip stitch, then working in the back loops only, slip stitch in each stitch across. Now when I work my slip stitches, I don't have any tension on my working yarn. I let it just lay loosely between my fingers. Sometimes I don't even hold, I barely hold my yarn. And always make sure you have a pile laying next to you. It can greatly affect your tension. Now if you find out that you're working too tight, then you can always go up a hook size. If you need to, you can use the same hook size as the rest of your pattern. That's not a big deal. For me, this is just the hook size that I'm used to using for my ribbing. I'm used to going down a hook size. Now, one way you can tell if your stitches are too tight is that your rows will begin to get shorter and shorter. Okay, your ribbing won't be nice and even. It's going to curve a little bit because you're pulling it in. You want to make sure that this fits the body part snugly. So it's going to pull in a little bit this way, but you don't want it to shrink this way. Okay, but now you can see how stretchy it's become. Now when you're finished, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up off camera just to show you. But as you work around, you're going to notice that it's going to pull in the bottom of your project. And you want this naturally to pull in a little bit. It'll help with the fit. And that is okay. So go ahead and repeat those 2 rows all the way around. You should be ending on a single crochet row where you slip stitch or you single crochet 2 together. I'll meet you back at the end and then we'll seam the last row to the first row. Okay, so go ahead and work around your project and meet me back here. Okay, now that I've worked my ribbing all the way around my little swatch, it's time to seam up the ends. Okay, now if you look at your swatch, you'll notice that how it's brought the edges inward. So it's made a nice little decrease. But don't worry, because it's just going to stretch right back out when you wear it. So it will still fit. Okay, so I ended with an odd number row, which was single crochet row, and ended with a single crochet 2 together. I still have 1 stitch left. So I'm going to slip stitch into that next stitch. And then I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Now we're going to work our seam. We're going to work into, this is our first row, and here's our last row. We're going to work into the front loops only of the first row, which is right here, the loop closest to you, and then the back loop only of the last row, which is the loop the furthest away. After you turn, make sure your working yarn is on the inside of your project. We're going to work with it over, just like that. So now we insert our hook from front to back in the front loop of the first stitch in the first row, and then we're going to insert our hook from back to front, the back loop only of the last stitch of the last row, or the first stitch of the last row. And it seems a little awkward, but our working yarn's inside, so yarn over and then pull that yarn through all loops on your hook. It's easier to do when you're not trying to show people on camera. So insert your hook from front to back into the front loop of the first row. Insert your hook from back to front into the next stitch from the last row. Yarn over and pull that loop through all the loops on your hook. You're slip stitching the ends together. So insert your hook from front to back into the next stitch of the first row. Insert your hook from back to front into the back loop only of the next stitch in the last row. Yarn over, pull that loop through all loops on your hook. You can finish the seam by working the same way. Insert your hook from front to back in the front loop of the next stitch of the first row. Insert your hook from back to front to the back loop only of the next stitch of the last row. Yarn over, and pull that loop all the way through all loops on your hook. There's one more stitch. Insert our hook in from front to back through the front loop of the first row. Insert our hook from back to front through the back loop of the last row. Yarn over and pull through all loops on your hook. And we're going to fasten off. And that completes our seam. You see how it's pretty darn invisible. It's hard to tell which row we ended on, well, without the loop in the way. It looks pretty close to the rest of the rows. So that is how you add a stretchy ribbed cuff or band to a crochet project. You can see how it would make a nice cuff for a sleeve, make nice cuff on mittens, a nice band for a hat, and then after it's worn, you take it off and it shrinks back to where it was. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to have a full photo tutorial on the blog as well, but if you ever have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on the blog post or send me an email. Thanks, have a great day.